I want to focus on what's going on over in what once was my hometown state of New York. We've got some info here from the Daily Wire. New York Democrat Governor Kathy Hochul announced on Wednesday that all 64 SUNY college campuses are being directed to update their policies to ensure that a person's chosen gender identity and pronouns are used. The policy will include chosen names to appear on diplomas and campus profiles, along with the ability to select X as a gender option by the fall 2023 semester. Every person, regardless of their gender identity or the name they chose to go by, deserves to have identity documentation that reflects who they are, Hochul said in a statement. The statement specifically noted that the student's chosen name and pronouns will appear in campus portals, class rosters, and student email addresses, among other changes. Stephen, I want to start with you on this one. I went to a SUNY school. I went to SUNY Binghamton. It was one of, if not the best SUNY school at the time. I don't know sort of where it ranks in that right now. But this is pretty consistent with everything coming out of New York, everything going across our quote unquote higher education right now. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to see that there is obviously a certain kind of contemporary prejudice and ideology behind this kind of thing. But I do think it's pretty important also to drill down to the level of principle here. When there's a lot of coercion and bullying into saying certain things, I think in this case we have to acknowledge, Dave, that this is merely individuals stating their own preferences. Now, we may think that those individuals may be influenced by a very anti-scientific ideology that is destabilizing one of the most fundamental categories of human beings, namely their sex. But we should also remember that this is the State University of New York. It is there for the people of New York. The governor is the elected head of the state. If the people don't like what she is doing with their university, they can change it. So I think that there is a sense in which you could even defend this as in the tradition of American individual liberty. However misguided we may think what these people are doing is, no one's being forced into anything.
You did not let me down with a thoughtful answer, as sort of silly as we all may think it is. Yes, choice is there. I kind of don't like it coming from the state. However, Debra, I'm going to throw to you on this one because they're also allowing you to select X as a gender option. Now, it's one thing if you're saying, okay, I'm going to call myself a different name or I'm going to call myself another gender. X is not a gender, is it? Am I missing something, Debra? This is your department.
No, I mean, non-binary is not backed by science whatsoever. And so X would be, I guess, for some people who want to be special, that's what they would have designated on their driver's license or passport or birth certificate now. So I agree with Stephen in terms of individual liberty. And I think people should be free to identify however they want, even if it is a anti-scientific concept. And I go into more of the science behind why there are two sexes and only two genders in the end of gender. But when it's being recognized by law, this I find very worrisome because why are ideas that are anti-scientific being put into policy? We see this in medical policy. Scientific organizations have capitulated to it. And I think it's just going to make it more difficult for these ideas to be removed from society when they are being given legal sanctions.
Marissa, I don't want to stab you right to start, but you live in California, which is the, let's say, the West Coast New York. So this is the type of stuff that if it is not in the Cali higher ed system will obviously be there. What do you make of this?
I think it's interesting when you talk about freedom, because if it was a private school, it would be a different issue, right? You pay a certain amount of money, you don't like it, take your kids out, put them in a public school and, hopefully live with that. But I think when public schools are doing things like this, the option of freedom is no longer really there. If you are a parent who can't afford a private school and you can't homeschool your child, how are you really free to choose? Not to mention, I understand your point that one could then elect different officials. But if you think about the span of a child's life, the difference between kindergarten and fourth grade. Those are 4 years of having no option of making any sort of change. And this kind of idea that let's, vote with our feet or pull our kids out is not that simple for many parents. It's the reality that you do have to go to work and put your kids in a school and can't wait 4 years without them brainwashing your child and essentially eroding the way they're thinking.
Stephen, what do you make of that point that we're all sort of agreed on the civil liberty side and the individual rights side and the choice side, but that there's just this sort of slow descent to hell with this thing that will just keep bringing in ideas that are wrong, and then we can defend someone's individual choice, but that the system itself, and as Marissa's saying, okay, you can elect other people, but people have 4-year or 6-year terms, and your kid, once they've sort of been infected by this at 5, it's sort of out of the barn by 9, 10 years old.
Oh, listen, you won't find a more strident defender of freedom of the mind or opponent of, let's say, propaganda and ideology than I am. But I do want to say that this is different, right? I mean, these are individuals stating preferences. No one's being forced into doing anything here, and it is not K-12 public school. This is the state university system of New York. No one is forced to go there, and when they do, they're not forced to say that they're any other gender than they want to say. So I do think we have to, it's important if we're going to criticize our opponents for being reductive and ideological, then it's important that we ourselves show nuance in this analysis. And in this case, however idiotic I may think, virtue signaling in the worst kind of way the governor may be being in this instance, it is categorically different than what we see at the elementary school level when you're actually forcing children to learn things that are dangerous and wrong.